Chosen one, there is a kind of recognition that does not travel through the mouth. It rises in the air and arranges the room before speech arrives. A quiet reshuffling of attention that feels like furniture finding its true places. You step in, and the atmosphere stops auditioning. The lighting seems to remember what faces are for. The moment organizes itself as if a conductor had just lifted a hand and the orchestra, relieved, settled into the right key. No vote is called, yet a decision has been made. Feminine women do not whisper about it. Their bodies have already delivered the verdict. Shoulders descend by a breath. Laughter lowers into its chest. Pacing recalibrates to something human. If there were a survey running under the skin, its needle would glide toward the same answer every time. Highest approval. Not because you campaigned, but because you arrived as someone who didn't need to. The approval that matters is not flattery in new clothes. It is the ease a presence creates. It is the felt sense that nothing predatory will happen to the moment while you are here. There is no scent of hunger wearing manners. There is no rush disguised as romance. There is the sturdiness of a person who has already negotiated with his own weather and won a peace that does not tax the room. In that peace, feminine women do not role-play their softness, they resume it. This is the secret ballot their instincts cast in your favor. Not applause, but relief. Relief is the body's yes. It does not need a headline to be believed. You did not earn this without cost. Somewhere far from crowds, you learn to keep promises too small to post online. You learn to bring your voice at a temperature words can survive. You learn to let your gaze return what it looks upon instead of collecting it as proof. You learn to end an hour in a way that leaves tomorrow uninjured. You learned finally to stop moving the north to flatter your mood. Those learnings became gravity, and gravity is what votes for you when no one is counting. The feminine knows gravity by feel. She will not always tell you why she trusts you, but her timing will testify. She stays longer. She speaks from deeper. She stops auditing the exits. Approval in this register is not popularity, it is permission. Your presence permits the room to tell the truth without losing its beauty. It permits desire to remain holy because it is housed. It permits contradiction to be aired without becoming a war. It permits silence to do its job. There is a quorum inside every woman that meets to decide whether a man is safe to welcome. Instinct, pace, boundaries, wonder. They don't take minutes, they read climate. When you keep your climate, they conclude without debate. Yes, the secret is not that you impress, it is that you don't compress. Nothing needs to shrink to make space for you. To prepare for this level of approval, you do not practice charm. You practice custody. Custody of tone, so warmth never conscripts. Custody of pace, so urgency does not counterfeit importance. Custody of intent, so wanting never bargains against truth. You do not arrive to harvest energy, you arrive to steward it. This is why feminine women lift their eyes when you speak and do not brace. This is why even those who will never choose you still relax in your orbit and find themselves speaking more accurately than they planned. Approval here is not a vote of fandom, it is a recognition of usefulness. Your presence lowers the cost of being real. There is a politics to rooms that hunger often distorts. Compliments become currency, scarcity becomes law, attention becomes a throne that must be defended. You quietly abolish that regime by declining to participate. You do not auction your presence. You do not borrow someone's uncertainty to inflate your certainty. You remain a place, not a spectacle. Places are measured differently. They are judged by what becomes possible, not by how loudly they claim it will. The feminine keeps such ledgers in the body, and her numbers settle around you the way tide settles after a good moon. Approval like this cannot be stolen and does not need to be announced. It shows up as continuity after you leave. The lamp remains at a height that dignifies faces. The conversation remembers its honest tempo. The chair still faces the person more than the door. That is your rating written into the grain of the hour. And when anyone asks why women seem to line up on your side of a scene without choreography, the answer remains plain and inconvenient for those who hoped it was a trick. You carry weather that can be worked in. The chosen ones always do. They make rooms where truth keeps its color, tenderness keeps its teeth, and time keeps its vow. So let your preparation be simple and relentless. Keep your breath where your feet are. Keep your word where your hands can reach it. Keep your heat where your vow can see it. Keep your eyes where no one loses themselves to be seen. Then walk in as if the room were already good and your job were only to help it remember. The votes will be counted before you speak. They always are. Chosen one, language is late to the party. The body throws when it finds safety. Her nervous system keeps its own polling station, and it is open at all hours. Ballots are cast in microseconds. The way breath exits without asking permission. The way the eyes widen without scanning. The way the jaw unhooks with no one noticing. She is not comparing resumes in this moment. She is comparing climates. Do I need to armor or can I orient? Do I need to explain or can I exist? Do I need to sprint or can I stand? Around you, the answers arrive quietly in favor of standing. That quiet is not emptiness. It is 1,000 yeses given all at once in the oldest language a body knows. There is a resonance that precedes rapport. Call it the tuning fork moment. Your steadiness sounds, and the string that runs from her belly to her throat to her eyes hums back in key. No fireworks, only calibration. Shoulders descend by degrees that look trivial to onlookers and feel like oceans to the one lowering them. The heart, which had been drumming instructions to prepare for performance, changes rhythm to the meter of comprehension. This is how the feminine issues her highest approval. Not with fanfare, but with physiological permission. It is not a crush. It is a corridor opening where there was once a choke point. You make this possible by keeping what most men spend. You keep ambiguity out of the way of consent. You keep pace at a speed that lets truth stay whole. You keep desire in a lantern where it gives light without threatening to burn the structure that shelters it. You keep your boundaries published early, like coastlines on a usable map, so no one has to learn them by running aground. These choices tell her nervous system a story faster than speech. There will be no surprise taxes on dignity here. There will be no leverage hidden in warmth. There will be no trial disguised as conversation. The body hears and votes accordingly. Yes to nearness. Yes to depth. Yes to softness. It is tempting to think the vote is about you. It is not. It is about whether life can remain life in your company. The nervous system is a conservationist. It spends itself where conditions will grow what it gives. You provide those conditions by being congruent. Congruence is not rigidity. It is loyalty to what is true even when the weather changes. Congruence feeds trust because it lowers the cost of prediction. When a woman can predict without bracing, her system invests. Investment shows up as presence. Presence is the dividend your presence earns. Notice how the signals stack. The eyes stop performing attention and begin to offer it. The voice deepens half an octave and trades sparkle for timbre. Humor loosens from the spine of defense and lands in the belly, where it belongs. The hands stop narrating safety and start participating in it. Holding a cup, taking notes, resting open on the table because there is nothing to hide or advertise. The room becomes a studio instead of a stage. In studios, nervous systems heal. In stages, they hustle. Your approval rating lives in the difference. Preparation for this cannot be outsourced to charisma. You train for it the way a craftsman trains, by making small things well until well becomes your reflex. You arrive on time, so time trusts you. You ask before you assume, so curiosity retains its innocence. You correct softly and specifically so truth doesn't have to shout to be heard. You apologize with measurements attached, so repair is not left to hope. You do the work of keeping your physiology from paying with hers, eating before you evangelize, resting before you reach, breathing before you decide. These are not lifestyle hacks. They are spiritual courtesies that her system reads as covenant. There will be moments when old alarms in her ribs wake up and insist that all warmth is a preface to fire. Do not audition for heroism. Stay at your human size. Let the lamp keep its height. Answer the fear with conditions, not with speeches. You will not be drafted into argument. You will be invited into pacing. And pacing is how the nervous system changes its mind without violence. When you refuse to escalate, cortisol loses its script. When you refuse to disappear, abandonment loses its rally. When you refuse to harvest vulnerability for credibility, intimacy remembers it is a garden and not a mine. Understand that the vote is continuous. Every interaction is a new ballot. This is good news. It means approval can deepen with every consistent act and does not need to be defended with spectacle. You do not need to be remarkable, you need to be reliable. Reliability is how a nervous system moves from maybe to mostly to home. Home, in this sense, is not ownership, it is orientation. It is the felt knowledge that one can be exact here, clear with no, clean with yes, slow with meaning, quick with mercy, without paying a penalty. And when she leaves your company, the truest proof arrives. Her system keeps some of your order and uses it in rooms you will never see. She answers messages at the size of the bond, not the size of her anxiety. She closes the laptop before exhaustion starts forging emails. She speaks to herself in your cadence instead of the old harsh one. Fewer shoulds, more measures. Fewer dramas, more decisions. This is how chosen ones are recognized, not by the noise they make in a moment, but by the quiet competence that remains after them, like a standard the body is happy to keep. So keep your craft, keep your climate, keep your vows sized for weather. Let your breath be the first honest thing in the room, and your exit the last gentle thing the hinge remembers. Let your desires stay lucid, your boundaries legible, your listening solvent. The poles you cannot see will continue to open and close in her chest, in her gut, in the long intelligence of her skin, and they will keep delivering the same result as long as you keep delivering the same man. That is the rating that matters. It cannot be bought, borrowed, or begged. It can only be built and then quietly, faithfully kept. Chosen one, there is a counsel beneath language that never adjourns. It sits in the marrow and at the base of the skull. It keeps minutes in the skin and delivers verdicts through breath. When you enter, that counsel convenes without fanfare. Files appear that she didn't know she kept. Sensations from childhood rooms where truth could sit without being cross-examined. Memories of faces that did not harvest her laughter. Echoes of hours when pace matched meaning. The counsel does not debate your resume. It samples your weather. How do you stand when nothing is demanded? Where does your gaze rest when there is nothing to gain? What do your hands do when silence is given the floor? The answers arrive before thought takes its first step. There is a tiny loosening in the jaw that no one sees, a recalibration in the eyes from scanning to seeing, a half-inch of shoulder release that changes the whole map of the hour. Her subconscious posts the results where only her body can read them. Highest approval, issued without ceremony. This is not hypnosis, it is literacy. The feminine subconscious recognizes coherence, like the tongue recognizes the difference between water and perfume. It knows when warmth is housed and when it is roaming, when attention is a gift and when it is a transaction, when desire is lucid and when it has borrowed menace to disguise uncertainty. You do not present theories to this part of her. You bring measurements. You arrive at the time you said, not because time will punish you if you don't, but because you have already decided your words should not have to carry you uphill tomorrow. You ask in clear sentences and receive in full silence. You let the small no protect the large yes, instead of turning boundaries into puzzles to be solved with charm. Her subconscious scores these realities in a script older than rhetoric. Every trait in you that makes a room safe to be exact becomes another vote for nearness that bypasses explanation. What happens next can look like mystery to those who don't understand the mechanics of trust. She does not suddenly perform interest. Her posture simply stops rehearsing defense. Humor shifts its address from the forehead to the belly because it no longer has to audition for survival. Curiosity steps into the room unarmed, free to ask without securing approval first. Even the rhythm of her sentences changes. They land where meaning can work instead of ricocheting off the walls built for self-protection. You did not conjure this with spectacle. You created the climate where her deeper intelligence feels safe to come above ground. The chosen ones know this climate work is the real royalty. It enthrones accuracy over anxiety, presence over performance, listening over leverage. Your preparation for such recognition is not a trick learned from a mirror. It is a vow kept when the mirror is gone. You have taught your heat to speak the dialect of reverence. You have made a habit of giving back what attention lends you, rather than collecting it as credentials. You have practiced ending an hour in a way that leaves tomorrow uninjured. Clean hinges, soft lights, no doors recruited to make a point. Every one of these unphotographable virtues has a somatic signature. Her subconscious reads them like sheet music. Here is a man whose warmth does not deputize urgency. Here is a man whose strength is not rented from volatility. Here is a man whose tenderness is not a campaign. The body casts ballots for continuity long before the mind drafts compliments. Sometimes her conscious mind tries to overrule the result. It will propose a thesis about preferences or a policy about not falling for presents. It will file appeals based on gossip dressed as caution. None of this is foolish. It is the self's attempt to honor past data. But data ages, and the subconscious keeps the newest records. It remembers how you did not interrupt her answer with your eagerness. It remembers how you let silence finish a thought instead of rushing in to rescue it for points. It remembers how your apology arrived with measurements and not with theater. These are not romantic gestures. They are the architecture of a livable hour. Architecture persuades the body more deeply than arguments do. Little by little, the appeal expires, and what her conscious mind calls attraction is revealed to be relief made visible. You will see evidence in what stops happening. She stops recruiting sarcasm to guard tenderness. She stops translating her instincts into metaphors to keep them from sounding inconvenient. She stops placing disclaimers in front of simple needs to buy the right to have them. The energy she once spent managing the possibility of harm has nothing to do, and in that vacancy wonder walks in and sets down its bag. Wonder does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with measurements. The right amount of light for faces, the right pace for comprehension, the right distance for consent. You, having learned how to keep reality from being a contest, become the most trusted instrument in the room, not because you play loudly, but because you keep time. The subconscious also studies exits. Anyone can feel holy for an entrance. How you leave teaches her deepest intelligence whether your presence is safety or spectacle. You do not consume the last minutes to secure your legend. You let the hinge close without bite. You do not assign tomorrow a debt for today's kindness. You leave like a craftsman, not a conqueror. The next day, when the old alarms test the new piece, her body checks the ledger and finds no hidden fees. This is how approval becomes durable. It is not pegged to adrenaline. It is indexed to integrity. If there is an instruction for you here, it is to honor how much has already been decided before the mind catches up. Walk as if a sanctuary had been entrusted to your weather. Keep your name out of rooms where cruelty is fashionable, even when dressed as wit. Refuse to use ambiguity as a tool to inflate demand. Make your request in a tone that does not force her nervous system to file a lawsuit to be heard. And then let the council do its ancient work. The vote will be cast where you cannot see it, but you will feel the result in the way a life relaxes enough to become generous again. That is the true rating. It is not counted by applause, it is counted by breath. Chosen one. Some crowns are placed on heads, others are grown in spines. The first can be stolen by noise, the second is beyond theft because it is not an accessory but an anatomy. Your highest approval among the feminine does not perch like a decoration, it lives like structure. It is fashioned out of the boring glories, consistency, clarity, repair, restraint, shaped in rooms without cameras. That is why it outlasts trend and outlives rumor. When envy reaches for it, there is nothing to grab. The crown is fused to the posture that forged it. Consider what this crown is made of. It begins with a refusal to move the north. You do not adjust your compass to flatter the hour. You adjust your steps to honor the compass. That loyalty builds an invisible diadem of predictability, an unsexy word that feels like silk to a nervous system. It says tomorrow will recognize today, and today will not mortgage tomorrow. Women feel this long before they narrate it. Around such men, their calendars stop living in court and start living in kitchens. They bake plans that rise, not because life is easy, but because the oven keeps its temperature. Your steadiness is that oven. It keeps the heat sweet. Another jewel is your governance of fire. Unhoused heat makes pyres. Housed heat makes hearths. You have chosen the second. The glass around your flame is made of vow, spoken edges, published limits, permission that breathes. In the circle of that governed glow, feminine softness does not fear combustion. It rests. It resourcefully warms. It becomes playful because it has somewhere true to play. Many seek a crown by amplifying intensity. You are crowned for how you keep intensity useful. The feminine knows the difference by feel. One asks her to become scenery for a spectacle. The other invites her to become herself in a room that works. Repair is the band that joins the whole. There is no crown where there is no repair. Not the staged apology that buys applause while leaving hinges squeak. Not the florid confession that recruits pity instead of changing behavior. Real repair is quiet carpentry. It listens for the weak beam, lifts the structure enough to replace what's cracked, puts everything back without boasting about how heavy it was. You do this because you value continuity over drama. Continuity builds trust the way rings build trees. Layer on layer, rarely noticed until a storm counts them out loud and finds the trunk still standing. When women witness such repair, they do not hand you approval. They recognize their own safety, tied to your stamina, and write it into their bones as default. Your crown is also secured by how you honor thresholds. Entry without entitlement, exit without punishment, distance without threat, nearness without demand. This geometry is not theoretical. It is felt in the choreography of moments. You arrive and do not loom. You depart and do not weaponize absence. You ask and do not cross-examine. You lead and do not confiscate autonomy. In rooms where power has been wielded like a spotlight, you tilt it down to table height so faces can be seen, not judged. The feminine reads these angles the way a sailor reads the shape of a coastline. The safest harbors, she knows, are not those with the brightest lighthouses, but those with soundings you can trust. Now and then, someone will attempt to turn your crown into a contest. They will measure you by volume and declare you too quiet, measure you by glitter and declare you too plain, measure you by conquest and declare you too slow. But the heart you serve was never hungry for spectacle. It was hungry for solvency. Spectacle spends, solvency sustains. Your approval rating stays high because you keep paying the invisible bills that make rooms humane. Tone held at a temperature truth can survive, pace set to comprehension, desire kept lucid enough to honor a boundary without turning it into an insult. These are not slogans. They are invoices the soul stops receiving when a man is careless. With you, the invoices stop. Her life keeps more of itself. Among the chosen ones, this is the only monarchy that matters. Stewardship so consistent, it becomes sovereign. Jealousy may still test the metal. Gossip may attempt to smudge what it cannot steal. The defense is never counterattack, it is continuity. You keep making the day work, and the day becomes your witness. The child that stops crying near your knee, the elder who tells you a story that requires both slowness and honor. The friend who leaves your company less confused than she arrived. These are the citizens of your quiet kingdom. They do not vote once. They vote again and again with the small sovereign acts of relaxed shoulders and honest sentences. In their relief, your crown is burnished. A final piece fixed to your brow by your own hand is the way you carry absence. A man obsessed with being seen will try to legislate the room when he steps out of it. A king of presence trusts his standards more than his shadow. You leave softly, you return surely, and you allow distance to do its clean work. Distance teaches memory to separate myth from mechanics. If a woman's sense of safety was an illusion, distance exposes it. If it was bonded to your actual practices, distance confirms it. Your crown is proven in that confirmation. What you started keeps working without you, not because you are irrelevant, but because you are responsible. The mark of real authority is that it multiplies agency, not dependence. Wear this crown without ceremony and with reverence. It is not a costume, it is a function. Keep your edges legible so the circle of your fire stays kind. Keep your truth early so repair can stay small. Keep your exits gracious so tomorrows arrive unafraid. Keep your yes revisitable and your no blessable so freedom remains the currency of the hour. Then walk forward without watching the mirrors. The feminine will do what it always does when it finds a climate that keeps it human. It will write thank you letters in physiology, approvals in breath, allegiance in ease. And should anyone ask why your rating remains high in rooms you did not curate, the answer will be waiting where it has always been, embedded in your way of keeping the weather, fused into the posture that cannot be taken because it was never borrowed. Chosen one, there is a meeting that happens without chairs or minutes, a subtle gathering of glances and breaths, that never names itself, yet reaches conclusions with the certainty of tides. You walk into a space, and the air conducts its old experiment. Will this presence increase life or spend it? The feminine reads the result in long-trained ways that have nothing to do with slogans. Micro-softenings around the mouth, a shoulder that returns to its rightful height, the way laughter slides from the edges of the face back into the chest where it can keep time. These are not signals of spectacle. They are signatures of safety. Safety is the first consensus, and desire follows it like a river follows its bed. There is no campaign. The polling station is the nervous system, and the ballot is exhale. Something in them votes yes before words volunteer a justification. Every room holds a fragile commons. Tone, pace, permission to pause, and desire that is honest refuses to loot that commons to prove itself. You are approved because your heat is housed and your curiosity is clean. The feminine can feel when attention arrives to witness rather than to requisition, when admiration is an atmosphere instead of a harvest. The consensus grows not by volume but by solvency. You pay the invisible bills that keep the moment humane. Your sentences come sized for comprehension rather than conquest. Your silences arrive with a purpose, letting meaning dress instead of turning the pause into pressure. And with each merciful choice, the invisible hands rise around the room. Here, yes, this. Consensus is not a trance. It is literacy. Instincts trained by winters and storms are not charmed by noise. They measure edges and govern distance and recognize a man who keeps his weather. You do not draft the hour for your legend. You let it remain a place where two intact centers can meet without permits. Women turn toward this like plants toward real light. They do not need to organize admiration. Biology performs the choreography, discreet and decisive. The eyes that used to scan for exits begin to linger on conversation. The jaw that had practiced 1,000 polite pivots unclenches into honesty. Even posture participates. Performance is a forward lean. Truth is an upright ease. The body does not lie about where it is welcome. Desire in you is a lantern with clear glass, not a wildfire demanding a spectacle. Lantern light reveals rather than interrogates. It invites rather than entraps. In that glow, the feminine recovers her right to choose without being taxed for either answer. Consent becomes climate rather than checkpoint. Yes can arrive in full sentences and remain revisitable. No can arrive without a courtroom's tone. The consensus deepens because free choice is delicious and rare. Where it is protected, attraction becomes generous instead of hungry. You do not try to accelerate what meaning must ripen. You do not sell scarcity to increase your shine. You keep pace with comprehension, the only speed at which intimacy can survive. And so the vote in her bones is not for the thrill of abandon, but for the dignity of belonging. You will not hear this consensus announced. You will feel it in the way play returns without costume. Wit loosens from armor and becomes gift. Teasing leaves the economy of leverage and enters the economy of delight. Touch, when it belongs, continues what truth began rather than campaigning for what truth cannot carry. Reverence has its own electricity, and it lights faces more beautifully than panic ever did. Even those who will never choose you rest near you. Their bodies prefer accurate weather, and your presence keeps the barometer honest. This is not charisma in the theatrical sense. It is credibility felt through skin. The chosen ones are recognized by the way they lower the cost of being real. The consensus remains quiet because what is sacred resists spectacle. It writes itself into durability rather than into headlines. After you leave, the lamp stays at a human height and conversations keep their humane grammar. The hinge remembers how to close without bite. A woman finds, without thinking about you, that she declines what wounds tomorrow and accepts what feeds it. Your standards lingering like a kindly law. This is the loudest praise there is, and it does not need to be spoken. A life functioning more justly after you were near. That is what the vote ratifies. Usefulness over theater, steadiness over story, heat with a vow over heat with a bill. If you would guard this consensus, keep doing the unphotographable. Let your want stay lucid enough to honor a boundary without turning it into an insult. Let your exits remain as careful as your entries, so tomorrow is not drafted to clean up today's performance. Let apology restore the seam rather than decorate regret. Keep warm hands and clear edges and a pace that refuses to force revelation before it is ripe. Desire, relieved of panic, becomes a builder. It frames mornings that begin without debt and nights that land without drama. That is how the quiet consensus is kept, with craft that allows the feminine to relax into accuracy. In that accuracy, the vote will keep returning, and with it, a sweetness that does not spoil in daylight. Chosen one, there is a booth that collects opinions and a threshold that collects truth. The first favors noise, the second requires nerve. Men who campaign for approval flood the booth with slogans and angles, forever auditioning for a crown that slips in the first rain. You have learned another politics, the sovereignty of presence. Presence does not distribute flyers, it keeps conditions. It is a devotion to custodial work that looks too ordinary to be strategy. Tone at a temperature words can endure, pace that keeps comprehension in the room, boundaries published early enough to prevent bruises, warmth housed so that it never conscripts consent.